Good day everyone, welcome back to my channel. We're going to look at, today, the Goliath gang from House of Chains. This video will include some lore for the Goliaths, as well as the overview of the gang and their unique skill and their gene crafting. First of all, we're going to do the lore. I'll try and include timestamps for the video, so if you want to skip certain parts, you will be able to. So we're going to do the lore first, and then we'll move on to the gang itself, and then we'll look at some of the weapons, their unique skills, and regular skills that they can have, and then the gene crafting, and then we'll do a little bit of a wrap up and conclusion on the Goliath itself. House Goliath were created to work in the foundries and refineries of Necromunda. They were basically created to be strong, endure in heat and horrible, dark and gloomy conditions, and basically made to function as working tools, basically living tools. They were implanted with a little chip which is called a cranial data slug. It was a mnemonic injection intended to keep the Goliaths ignorant and only include a very basic level of information. However, the alphas ensured the data slug was altered to include the knowledge of the experience of the Goliaths who came beforehand. This way, the Goliaths gained a sort of generational learning and knowledge, and that allowed them over hundreds of generations to become free. Despite this advantage, most Goliaths are still only suited to work in refineries. Initiative and creativity remain rather sparse within the clan itself or the house. Occasionally, an individual will rise up and be noted as a leader, and that's where you get the gang leader from. The clan house is stratified into several social groups. While all Goliaths are equal, some have more gifts than others. The largest group is called the Vatborn. The Vatborn are, as the name implies, they were grown in vats. They are still limited by lifespan, intelligence apart from the chip, and a few other things. Many of the alphas in the gang, so the leaders, are Vatborn, but as time has come on, many of the alphas are more natural born, which means they're basically unable to have children and they reproduce that way. And then there's the unborn, who are outsiders who come into the house and are genetically altered to become Goliaths. These are people who are enhanced and must undergo horrible surgeries and chemical concoctions just to put them on par with regular Goliaths. Appearance-wise, the difference between them is very minimal, except maybe their intelligence or other things, but a Goliath will be able to tell the difference just by looking at them. While some consider House Goliath's strength equal to its genetic history, and therefore they owe their creators. Now, some claim that they were an experiment made simply by two other gangs. Now, in some things, it's stated as being a collaboration between the Van Saar, because they tried to grow bodies for themselves because they were so weakened by the radiation from their STC device, and the chemical processes of the Escher. So both gangs hold a little bit of arrogance towards the Goliaths simply because they created them. Now, the house structure is a little bit like a fighting pit. Only the strongest get to be on top, and those with more intelligence tend to use this intelligence, but they also know they need to be strong. So therefore, they'll pit themselves against weaker opponents and use their wiles and cunning to make sure that they challenge people directly after fights. So that way, even though they might be slightly weaker than those opponents that they'll challenge will often be tired or injured, and therefore they'll be able to get the most cunning and the most, I wouldn't say sinister, but the most opportunistic individuals. The House Over-Tyrant is named Baron Gar. There are a few other names, such as the Hive Apocalypse Alpha, who is Torgan the Crusher. Hive Primus is Durogian Ironhand, and House Trezor is Berthel Hammer. Each hive has its own alpha. And that's just a few of the names. The Over-Tyrant is the alpha of alphas, and I don't think we have any stats for him. House Goliath control a lot of forges, factory workshops, less so than Mechanicum ones, but more like producing iron girders or chains, and a lot of other things too. They also has its hand in chems, docks and pit slaves. Now these doctors tend to be more gene manipulation rather than generic doctors, and it has a rather unsavoury reputation with the slave guild, where they will basically steal members, and it's sort of like an unhealthy partnership that both sides exploit to the maximum. Now, the base materials that the Goliaths produce is often sold to other clan houses. This amounts to millions of tons of forged metal, fabrication of weapons and other ordnance. Each cycle, the insatiable arms industry requires more and more plasteel, metal, armor glass and ceramite from the Goliath, and they're only too happy to provide it for a price. Saying that, Goliaths are heavily dependent on chemicals and vats and equipment to make them as strong as they once were grown. A Goliath fresh from the vat is ill-suited to the structures of Necromundian society. Even the natural-born who mature from infants in the space of 1 or 2 great cycles need an accelerated method of learning, and this is their chips basically. It's based on the same neurotechnologies as their previous chips when they were slaves, but it's slightly more enhanced to give them a lot more knowledge. Part 2. The gang list. Gang composition. Right, so what you must do is a fighter can be equipped with a maximum of 3 weapons purchased from those listed in their armories. Fighters may purchase any war gear listed in their inventory. There must be 1 fighter with a leader special rule. The total number of fighters with a gang fighter X special rule must always be equal or higher than the total number of fighters with the gang fighter X special rule combined, not counting hangers on or hired guns. Reads a bit odd, but that's word for word. Should it occur that the campaign, the number of fighters without the gang fighter X special rule exceeds the number of total fighters with it, the controlling player must either retire a number of fighters during the post-battle sequence or recruit fresh members. So it's a mistake in this version. So basically, it must be equal to or higher than the numbers without gang fighter X special rule. Some gangers or leaders or champions can have multiple sets of equipment, and you can basically make yourself multiple cards for that fighter. Okay, so your leadership or your leader of the gang is called a Forge Tyrant. He is 135 credits. He can activate 2 individuals during the activation. He can have Brawn as his primary skill, Combat secondary, Ferocity primary, Leadership primary, Shooting secondary, Muscle secondary. He has a weapon skill of 3, a ballistic skill of 3+, movement 4, strength 4, toughness 4, wounds 2, initiative 3, attacks 3, leadership 5, cool 4, willpower 8, intelligence 7. The Forge Tyrant has quite a long list of weapons and accessories. He can take a lot of heavy weapons now. This edition of Necromunda does enable certain leaders to take heavy weapons, which is really interesting, especially for certain gangs that will have higher ballistic skill. So it is, in my opinion, worth looking at for certain gangs, but certainly maybe not the Goliath. Goliath's weapon skill and missile skill isn't too bad actually, 3 and 3. However, if you're going to arm him with a heavy weapon, now you can choose quite a few of them. Missile launcher, multi-melter, the brevet cannon, the heavy stubber, heavy flamer, and heavy bolter. Saying that, a heavy weapon has the asterisk, which means it takes the place of 2 weapons. So if you're going to take a heavy weapon, or any other weapon that has the asterisk, you can only take 1 additional weapon. In my opinion, a leadership or a leader for Goliath should probably take some armor, so carapace armor maybe, but you again looking at a high cost for the leader if you do decide to arm him with armor. Bonus plates are of course 5 credits. None of the gangers or people start with any kind of melee weapons, armor, so it's worth probably investing in some armor, especially for certain fighters, your leader and maybe one of your champions. In my opinion, you're probably better off arming him with either a combi weapon, so you can have a bolter flamer, bolter grenade launcher, bolter melter, bolter plasma gun flamer, with a flamer by itself, a grenade launcher with fragging crack grenades, or a melter gun. You can also arm him with a combi pistol, bolt pistol, plasma pistol, combi pistol, stub gun, plasma pistol. Both of those options those 3 options for the pistol combi weapons are good versions. Close combat wise, you see, if you are going to take a close combat weapon, some of them do have the asterisk, which means they're two-handed. Often they will say it, but the renderizer doesn't. You can also have a sump croc, which is like a pet alligator, for 130 credits. My advice would be to probably arm him, as I said, with either one of the combi weapons, and maybe a two-handed weapon to take advantage of the strength 4. Forge boss. These are your champions, your regular champions. Movement 4, weapon skill 3, ballistic skill 4, strength 4, toughness 4, wounds 2, initiative 4, attacks 2, leadership 6, cools 5+, willpower 8, intelligence 8, 100 credits each. They can choose one from their primary skill options, and of course the leader can choose one from their primary skill options as well. The skill access is Brawn primary, Combat secondary, Ferocity primary, Leadership secondary, Shooting secondary, Muscle secondary. Again, he has quite a large variety of weapons, almost the same, I think it is basically the same as your leader has. So if you don't arm your leader, say with a heavy weapon, it might be worth arming your Forge boss with one. People are going to say avoid the rivet cannon, but I think it's not too bad. It's very situational. It's got like a medium range, but you see, I would either arm him with a heavy bolter or a heavy stubber. You're going to want something with some significant range. Missile launchers in Necromunda, in my opinion, are only worth it for certain gangs, certainly not Goliaths. Moving on, we have the Stimmer. The Stimmer is the special champion that they have. He has the Combat Chem Stash rule, which gives him +3 attacks. He also has 1 skill from his primary skill sets. He has a weapon skill of 2+ though, so my advice on him is to make him a melee beat stick. He's got movement 4, weapon skill 2+, as I've said, ballistic skill 4+, strength 4, toughness 4, wounds 2, initiative 3, attacks 3, leadership 8, cool 4, willpower 7, intelligence 8. 125 credits. He does have a smaller list of weapons. He can have the assault grenade launchers with stun rounds and frag grenades. He can upgrade to crack grenades and smoke grenades. Again, in my opinion, it's not worth giving him the assault grenade launcher because he's got a significantly reduced weapon skill, ballistic skill. Saying that, you can give him paired weapons such as the serrated renderizer axe, which basically means he can wield a two-handed weapon in one hand. Is that good? He can have a stub pistol with dum-dum rounds of 10 credits. In my opinion, it's probably worth giving him a stub pistol if you don't give him, the assault grenades. I wouldn't give him one, but anyway. He has Brawny secondary, combat secondary, ferocity primary, muscle primary. This is where it's probably worth looking at the muscle skills, especially if you tool him up with close combat weapons. Moving on, we have the prospects for the Goliaths, which are the Forgeborn. They have a movement of 5, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 5, strength 3, toughness 4, 1 wound, initiative 4, attacks 1, leadership 9, cool 7, willpower 9, intelligence 8. I want to just say that the stimmer is 125 credits, whereas the prospect is 35 credits. Promotion. During the downtime, if this fighter has gained 5 or more advances, it may become a forge boss or a stimmer. When they do so, they lose the hot-headed fast learner and gang fighter rules, but gain the relevant rules for the stimmer and or forge boss as appropriate. When promoted, it does say to use the appropriate model. Hot-headed fighters with this special rule have much to prove and often act on impulse alone, hoping to impress their superiors. Consequently, older and wiser fighters expect them to be short-lived. Should a fighter with this special rule be seriously injured, nobody has to within 3 inches has to take a nerve test, unless they also have this rule. Fast learner, basically they gain additional 2 XP. In addition, this fighter may improve any characteristic any number of times up to the maximum for the basic XP cost shown each time, so that's pretty good. The Forgeborn has a rather limited selection of rules. They can have the Storm Welder. The Storm Welder is a very dangerous weapon that's almost as bad as to you as to other people. You can also have a Heavy Rock Saw, so basically you're limited to 2 weapons. You can have a grenade, armor, furnace plates, fire booster, filter plugs, and the stub pistol. Agility is secondary, combat primary, shooting secondary. Goliath Bruiser. These are regular gangers. Movement 4, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 4, strength 4, toughness 4, 1 wound, initiative 4, attacks 1, leadership 8, cool 5, willpower 9, intelligence 8, 55 credits each. During creation, you can make one a specialist. In addition, you can make them specialists with XP. They gain the Tools of the Trade special rule and may purchase special weapons. So, in the beginning, I would take one as a specialist and arm him with probably a grenade launcher or a melter gun. Skill access, brawn primary, combat secondary, ferocity primary, shooting secondary. Stub cannons are 20 credits. Stub cannons are awesome, and I would arm at least 3 with stub cannons in my opinion. Or bolt guns are 55 credits now. A lot of people do use bolt guns on your Goliath as they're a gang that can have them. Bolt guns are great, however your stub cannon is going to pass a lot more tests than your bolt gun. So if you are going to arm one with a bolt gun, be prepared to take a side weapon as well. And don't make it a bolt pistol, make it a stub gun, because you want to pass some ammo rolls. Saying that, they can have quite a lot of close combat weapons. Not as much as others, but they get a fair amount. Last in the gang list is the Bully, which is your Jews, and 35 credits each. They are the same cost as your Forgeborn. and they do have quite a limited supply of weapons. They can only have a stub gun, melee weapons. This is their skill list: agility secondary, brawn secondary, ferocity primary, movement 4, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 5, strength 4, toughness 4, 1 wound, initiative 4, attacks 1, leadership 9, cool 7, willpower 9, intelligence 8. Promotion. During the downtime, basically if you have 5 advancements, it gets to become a specialist, but they will lose due fast learner and gain all the rules associated with a Goliath specialist. So your Jews can no longer become gangers, they can only become specialists, whereas your Forgeborn can become champions, basically. So that's how it works. They can have a sump croc. A sump croc is the baby crocodile. It is an exotic beast. Now, some people can have it automatically during gang creation. Your Stimmer can have it. Your Forge Boss, which is your regular champion, and your Tyrant can have it. In my opinion, it might be worth looking at one in gang creation if you are doing a campaign that has 1500 credits starting. But other than that, wait until you got enough credits to buy it separately. Moving on, we are going to look at muscle skills. There are 6 skills. Iron Man is this fighter's toughness is not reduced by flesh wounds. However, if this fighter suffers a number of flesh wounds equal to their toughness characteristics, they will go out of action as normal. Fist of Steel, unarmed attacks made by this fighter count as having a strength 2 higher than normal and inflict 2 damage. It's pretty good. Immovable Stance, the fighter may perform a tank double action until the start of this fighter's next activation. This fighter increases their armor save by 2, which is really good, to a maximum of +2, 2+, and cannot be moved from their current location, such as by skills as Hurl or Overseer, or by any weapon which has knockback, drag, nor can they be pinned. That is awesome skill. Narg, or Nara. This fighter's activation, they may attempt to perform a third action after their first 2. On a roll of a d6, if this dice roll is equal or less to their toughness, they perform the action. If their roll is greater than their toughness or is a 6, their action ends immediately, whether they are successful or not. When their activation ends, they are automatically pinned. This pinning cannot be negated by nerves of steel. Unleash the Beast. They may perform Flex. All fighters, friend or foe, in base contact with this fighter must pass a strength check or be pushed d3 away from this fighter. Stopping only if they come into contact with another fighter or impassable terrain feature. If there are multiple enemies being pushed, the player controlling this fighter chooses which order they are moved. Walk it off. Should this fighter perform 2 or more simple actions during their activation, they can take a toughness check and end their activation if this check is passed. If this check is passed, this fighter may recover 1 lost wound or discard a single flesh wound. That's pretty good. Genesmithing. Alright. This is the last section, Genesmithing, and then we'll do the wrap up. Genesmithing enables you to mess around with your stats. Vatborn, it costs 0 credits. Natborn, 10 credits. Unborn, 10 credits. Fighters can only be Genesmith when they are added to a gang, so you can only do it in your gang creation. The fighter can only select Genesmithing upgrades from those available to their subtype. Vatborn fighters make the vast majority of Goliaths. When added to a gang, Vatborn fighters can choose from any of the Genesmithing upgrades, adjusting the credits cost of the fighter accordingly. Notice that some upgrades have a negative cost. These represent flaws in deficiencies that weaken a fighter in some way. In these instances, the cost of the upgrade is deducted from their fighter's base cost as shown on the list. Now, I'm going to put up a chart of the Vatborn Genesmith upgrades. We're going to look at them very quickly. Some of them do reduce your credits cost, such as reduced bone credit density and corrupted slug. Reduced bone density reduces their strength or their toughness by 1. Corrupted Slug reduces fighters' leadership, willpower, or intelligence by 1. The plus ones. There's also one more nice one. Terminal Biology. The years are catching up to this fighter and their body's beginning to fail. Each time you suffer an injury, a lasting injury, on a d6, on a roll of a 1, the fighter dies. So, unless you really want to... A nerve burnout as well. Age and brutality of gang warfare have caused nerve burnout. Reduce this fighter's call by 1. Okay. Fearless but foolish. Increase this fighter's call by 1, but reduce intelligence by 1, plus 5. Genetic Ancient, 10 credits. Increase this fighter's leadership, willpower, intelligence by 1. Hardened Immune System. Hits from weapons with gas or toxin only ever affect this fighter on a 6, rolling against their toughness. Hyper Healing, that's plus 15. On a roll of d6, the fighter can heal 1 of their lasting injuries and remove its effects from their fighter card. Thermal Hardening, increase toughness by 1. Terminal Biology, which is I've already described, that's the minus 10 credits one. Overdeveloped Musculature, a massive slab-like cocoon on this fighter. Increase their fighter strength by 1, but reduce their initiative by 1. Okay. In conclusion, the Vatborn gene smithing is okay. I would look at it. The plus 5 one. Overdeveloped musculature for your stimmers. So seriously consider it for that. Natborn fighters, clever but cautious. Natborn alter their starting characteristics by increasing their intelligence by 2 and increasing their willpower by 1 and decreasing their call by 1. Natborn have blessing of near perfect flesh and can build their muscles faster than any other subtypes. Natural born leaders, champions, prospects, dupes, and specialists can increase their strength or toughness at a cost of 6 XP rather than 8 XP. When Natborn fighters gain an advancement, they either roll on their gang advancement table, see Necromunda rulebook, or increase their strength or toughness by 1. When added to a gang, Natborn fighters can choose from any of the Genesmith upgrades below, so they've got 3. When added to the gang, adjusting the cost of the fighter accordingly, note some upgrades have a negative cost. It's the same rules as before. Adaptive Biology, 10 credits. Adaptive Mind, 5. Reroll any strength or toughness checks that you take from gas or toxin. Must reroll, basically, or must equal or beat the toughness. Adaptive Mind counts their secondary skills as primary when spending XP. Alpha's Lineage, 10 credits, 20 credits. This fighter counts as leadership skill set as their primary skill set. As one of them. In addition, this fighter has group activation. Basically, they have the... Basically, you can give it to a specialist and make them like a mini champion. Unfleshed, 10 credits. Increase wounds by 1. Over-engineered, minus 10. When this fighter must roll on the lasting injury table, they must roll twice and accept the higher result. This gene smithing upgrade cannot be taken with redundant organs. Prime Specimen, this fighter can improve one of their characteristics by 1 for plus 10 credits. Rapid muscle growth, then can increase their strength characteristic by up to 3 points, but rather than plus 2. Redundant organs, plus 15. When this fighter must roll on a lasting injury table, they must roll twice and accept the lower result. So basically it's the reverse of over-engineered. Tyrant's Own, the Over-Tyrant's offspring are the strongest amongst all Goliaths, and they often walk the path of the Alpha. Their gaze set up one day claiming the title of Over-Tyrant for themselves. This fighter can improve any 2 of their characteristics by 1. Only a Forged Tyrant may take this upgrade. Tyrant's Pride. Goliaths grow in power through only competition with their kin, and the strongest amongst them soon defeat all challengers for dominance, leaving them surrounded by lesser warriors. Only a Forge Tyrant may take this upgrade. This fighter's gang can include no fighter with gang hurry. So basically you can't have any champions if you have that one. Yeah, so that's minus 20 credits. I don't know why you would ever take that. That's the worst one. Unborn fighters. So basically people who come into the gang and get altered. Unborn fighters can choose to have an additional primary skill set. Agility, Brawn, Combat, Cunning, Frosty, Shooting or Savant. However, unborn fighters may never select muscle skills. They can choose any of the Smith upgrades below. Some have a negative cross, as said. Data slug overlay. It's false engrams. When a fighter activates for the first time in battle, they must take an intelligence check. If the check is failed, they become insane. And have the insane condition. Doc's experiment. Select 2 of the following characteristics: movement, strength, toughness, or wounds. Increase one by 1 and decrease the other by 1. You cannot choose the characteristic to decrease if doing so would lower it to 0. Doc's failure. Select 2 of the following characteristics: movement, strength, toughness, and wounds. Decrease both by 1. You cannot again make one 0. Genetic outsider, 5 credits. An air of distrust surrounds this fighter no matter how hard they prove themselves. Other Goliaths in their presence, this fighter cannot use the group activation rule. Only a Forge Tyrant or Forge Boss can take this Gene Smith upgrade. Don't know why you would ever use it. Malformed increases their strength characteristic by 1, but reduces initiative by 1. Proto Goliath has yet to undergo the transformative surgery to become a proper Goliath, but they aspire to be part of the clan. Increase the fighter's movement by 1, reduce their strength by 1, reduce their toughness by 1, reduce their core by 2, increase their intelligence by 2, and their willpower by 1. Not too bad. Scar tissue. Reduce all damage by 1 to a minimum of 1. Survivor. When rolling recovery tests, they may reroll 1 of the injury dice. Stim implant, plus 5. Survivor's plus 10, and scar tissue is plus 10. And Protoglass is minus 10, as you can see here. Experimental organs, they can choose to increase their strength by 2 until the end of the round. However, if they do, roll a d6 on a plus 4 flesh wound. 2 lives. Despite being remade into a Goliath, it retains some of their skills from their previous life. Memories that can sometimes be dredged to the surface whenever this fighter gains a skill in an advancement tree for free or during gang creation. They randomly generate a skill from their primary or secondary skill sets. Make a note on the fighter's card about these 2 skills. A repair. Whenever this fighter is selected to take part in a battle, one of these skills determined at random will be forgotten. Determine basically you number 1 to 3, other 4 to 6. The number rolled indicates which pair of skills is forgotten. Okay, so that's the gene smithing. Now there is probably a way to min-max them. However, in my opinion, you are probably wanting to use a lot more nat-born fighters because of the bonuses that it gives you. Unborn does give you some interesting tools to play with. 2 lives, for example, and stim implant. But Vatborn also does have some nice things to play around with, but I think I would just be using Natborn if I was be doing gene smithing. Gene smithing can become quite costly, so we've looked at the cost and the gene smithing upgrades. Now there's a lot of options, and someone better than me would probably look at them and min-max them a lot, in my opinion. On cursory glances, the Natborn stuff is the winner, basically. However, if you do play around with them too much, you are going to end up with a fighter that's only useful for one thing, such as melee or something, and that might be an option, especially for your stimmers and alphas even. In my conclusion, the Goliaths have some rather interesting stuff. Their tactics seem to be on mid-range to short range, and while certainly they're not as melee focused as, for example, the Corpse Grinder Cult, they certainly are up on par with them in some respects. Now, some of the weapons I would never give them. For example, the Storm Welder, because it has the reckless, unstable shock rules. Oh, but their other ones, such as the Rivet Cannon, aren't too bad for short to medium range. Let's quickly, the Rivet Cannon. It's got a maximum of 9-inch range, which means you are putting yourself into a charge distance using it. Now, it can have blaze and rending with superheated, and it is rapid fire. It is a decent ammo roll as well. Strength 4 and Strength 6 respectively. Strength 6 being, of course, the superheated. You know, it's okay. It's okay, but if you are going to use it, I would pair him up with a an individual who would be carrying something much heavy, longer range, such as, for example, heavy bolter or a heavy stubber. The stub cannon has an 18-inch range, strength 5, which is really good, and it has the knockback special rule, which is always useful for pinging people over edges. So yeah, that's just the weapons that I wanted to talk about. Now we could also talk about the assault twin grenade launchers, which have a 6 to 18-inch range, concussion, rapid fire with their stun rounds. Frag grenades have blast and knockback, rapid fire and unstable. Crack grenades don't have any rules, special rules. Smoke grenades have blast and smoke. So although a stimmer will have rather awful ballistic skill, unless you engineer him to, you know, not be, it might be an option actually, looking at the gene smithing rules. So you certainly could do 2 stimmers and make one decent at range, make one decent at melee. Might be an interesting idea to do. So maybe I will work something out and do another video where I will try and min-max the gene smithing rules. This is just a basic overview of the gang and a few of the weapons. In conclusion, yeah, they're a short to medium range. Certainly aren't going to be winning against, for example, a full kitted out butcher for the Corpse Grinder Cult, but they certainly will stand their ground against lesser individuals. The thoughts are that the muscle skills can be very useful if you can give them to individuals. Now, often muscle skills seem to be secondary and only primary for a couple of fighters, but saying that, if you do get the right skills, they can be really cool. I would say maybe your overboss not having overseer, maybe going for something else. That might certainly be an option, because a lot of people will use overseer with leaders. In my opinion, it's probably not as useful as it used to be, because the rules have changed. But it certainly is it certainly is an option for other gangs, maybe less so Goliath. In my opinion, Goliaths are a pretty strong gang. I would certainly rate them 3rd or 4th of the gangs that we have now. They probably are beaten by Corpse Grinder Cult and maybe Vansar, of course. But as time comes on, we're going to look at the gangs, and at the end of all these gang videos, we'll do a proper tier list and I'll explain why. So thank you all for watching. It is a bit of a longer video, but I hope it was worth it. Do take care of yourselves, and bye-bye.